So when I started seeing consistently that the performance for children from my community were consistently beneath other communities, I didn't see that as a reflection on my community's potential. I saw it as a reflection on the education system, and I saw that this must be social engineering.
Hello, thank you for joining Falling for Learning podcast. I am TD Blenah. I'm a veteran educator who's worked in several different roles in a large public school district. I've worked as an elementary, middle school, and high school teacher, as well as an instructional coach for individual schools, such as elementary schools, high schools, as well as worked under the directors or the principal's supervisors as an instructional advisor for English language arts for 39 schools, and then later for 20 schools supervised by a particular administrator. So I have extensive experience with working with schools and teachers and students from pre-kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. And so as a parent, coupled with my experience as a parent, I have extensive knowledge in how to make sure that students are prepared for the next level and that they are on track for learning and to stay on track for success.
All right. Hi. Thank you so much for joining the Falling for Learning podcast. I'm TD Blenah, and here we have the founders of American Math, and they're going to introduce themselves and talk about how they can really give parents insight in how to make their children get on track with math.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having us. My name is Jelani. We're based here in Washington, D.C., and we're dedicated to the research and development of the U.S. customary system. I'm going to pass it on to...
My name is Nkosi. I'm the founder of American Math and African Math as well. We are dedicated, again, like you said, to making sure that Americans have a very proficient way in which to do the U.S. customary system.
All right. So I noticed you were saying African Math as well. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
You know about African Math. So yeah, African Math is a program that we started, I think, in 2013, 14. And it is a math program that literally does research and development about the ancient math practices that were done by Africans in antiquity and even into the modern era. So we did investigations into how Africans did math in antiquity, even up into the modern era. So we went to Africa, we did research, we found about the language. We also did research from African Americans and the work that they did with mathematics here in America. But actually, we found some interesting ties between ancient African math and American math. So
amazing. Okay, so you've introduced yourself. Can you all tell us a little bit about your background and your expertise in the math area? So we'll start with you, Jelani.
So the bulk of my experience comes from hands-on learning. I've had the privilege to be able to travel around the world to learn under different environments. So I spent some time in South Florida for some time, Washington, D.C., learning architecture at UDC. And I've also had the ability to travel to South Africa to study over there as well and learn more about the culture and more about the history and language over there. Can
I stop you for 1 second? Can you tell us what UDC is? Because we have people from all over the country and may not be sure what that is.
Excuse me. So UDC is the University of the District of Columbia because we're stationed here in Washington, D.C. So I studied there for some time. And the bulk of my expertise, I've been using the American Math and the African Math program throughout most of my education, especially in my high school and college years. I really doubled down on learning it. And using the system, I got a 4.0 GPA throughout the entirety of high school and the time that I spent at college studying architecture. So I can definitely speak to a testament that the program does work and it has applications in the school system. But yeah, that's about my expertise and a little bit more about my history.
Thank you. Mr. Nkosi, what is your expertise? Can you give us that background for our audience?
All right, so I have an untraditional background. I learned math from my community. My grandparents, my grandmother, it's going to sound crazy, but I grew up in an environment where math had to be used pragmatically in many ways, some licit, some illicit. So I remember my grandmother, she used to be a number runner. So you had to know math in order to run numbers, which ultimately became America's lottery system. And then my grandfathers on both the maternal and paternal side, they were involved in construction and they were involved in the infrastructure development of the United States of America. They actually gave their lives building the infrastructure of the United States of America. So they had to be proficient in building bridges and roads and houses and building infrastructure projects. So when I was a teenager too, I had to go out and start, helping with renovations and construction projects. And we had to learn the U.S. customary system. And then I also came up with a generation where a lot of young people in the street, let's just say they were very entrepreneurial and they picked up methods in which to make money that necessitated you be very good with numbers because your life could literally depend on it. So those were the environments where I learned math, and how well you were at math could literally cost you your life. So it was a life or death type of approach to mathematics. So when I became a parent and I saw that, I saw the statistics on how people from my community were faring in math compared to other people in other communities, it just didn't make sense to me, especially when I started looking at the stats. And again, from my perspective, numbers is very important when it comes to measuring, how much you made that day or how well you're doing. So when I started looking at stats on, the math proficiency in my community, I was like, oh no, those numbers don't look good, because in the majority of the communities, I'm like, yo, what you mean 50% proficiency? That's failure.
Right. Absolutely.
You don't do failure. So I was offended by the numbers, and so I started talking to people in my community from other demographics, and I was like, do your community get the same type of failure rates that I'm getting here? And when I started seeing like their community weren't getting the same type of failure rates, I said, that's not the children, and it's the school system.
The school system. So that takes me to the next question. So tell us about your program, American Math, and how you help people, and how the parents who are our audience can really benefit from it. Their kids can benefit from it.
The first thing is about American Math. Understand that we had to claim ownership of it, so it's proprietary. So we're the official owners of American Math. It's a trademark program. It's proprietary. The reason we decided to do American Math is because we saw there was a lack of parents having input on what their children are learning in school. So it's amazing that American Math, our concentration is going directly to superintendents, administrators, principals who want to do professional development that is aligned to not necessarily standards. It's aligned to the learning outcomes that teachers desire for their children and parents that desire. So we work intimately with educators and parents to know what those desired outcomes are. We also work intimately with industry leaders, like in architecture, engineering, because we have an infrastructure crisis here in the United States of America. So we need to prepare future generations to know the math that's used in our built environment. And that's really a major component of American Math that's outside of the standards, because our concentration is the pragmatic application of math in real world, which means that we can't wait for standard organizations who disconnected and don't even really know the problem to say these are the standards you should learn. So we're on the forefront. We have, there's no cowardice in what we do. And if you want to reach out to us, you have to love your children, because the problem that I faced is I was really offended by the achievement gap. You know what achievement gap is, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So for those who don't know what the achievement gap is, it is the disparity in outcomes and performance in the United States education system based on race. So when I started seeing consistently that the performance for children from my community were consistently beneath other communities, I didn't see that as a reflection on my community's potential. I saw it as a reflection on the education system, and I saw that this must be social engineering. So When I saw it as a social engineering problem, I felt offended by people who became complacent and okay with it.
Yes.
Again, because I come from an environment where it's like, it's just not okay. You know, it's not okay.
Absolutely. Failure is not an option.
Listen, parents, it's summertime. The days are flying by, and you still haven't buckled down yet and provided learning activities for those babies. It's okay. I can help you out. All you have to do is go to www.tinyurl.com/learn10way. Learn the number 10 way. And I will give you our freebie in exchange for your email, 10 ways to squeeze learning fun into busy days. Don't let another day go by without providing fun learning activities that will give your child the competitive edge.
How does your program work? And again, how I noticed that you were saying that the superintendents or the principals, how does it work? How is it structured? And in what way, how does your program flow?
Okay, so we're mostly targeted to provide professional development to principals, professional development to college professors, professional development to educators. We're structured to provide professional development. The reason why we need to provide professional development is because America has decided to standardize education. Okay. So I don't know if people know what that means, but I can give you more insight in professional development. So we've researched the standards, and I actually like the fact that we have standards, because now education can be comprehensive and measurable around the entire world.
So you're thinking about the Common Core state standards? Is that what you're referring to, or which standards you're referring to?
Well, Common Core was the first to roll out as far as standards, but some states have not decided to adopt Common Core.
Right.
But the trend is still standardization. So if you go to other countries, like if you go to Asia, they created that's whoever actually led the way. They've led the way by saying that if I'm teaching geometry in let's say the third grade, if I'm teaching third grade geometry, I need to have the same expectations and understanding of what the material is as someone on the other side of the country. Mm-hmm. So that made sense. Before standards were introduced, someone in Florida would have different expectations than someone in California. So if I were to tell you, you need to go to third grade standards, and we're going to look up MD. MD stands for measurement and data. If I say OA, third grade OA, that means third grade operations and algebraic thinking. Mm-hmm. Right. So if I say kindergarten CC, you'll know that means kindergarten counting cardinality. Yes. So it's important that parents and educators know the standards.
Yes.
And what I've learned is it's like just getting there is challenging.
So you're thinking with your program. So you guys you present the standards and help people to break down what the standards are. That's one of the products that you offer for professional development. Okay. Cool.
We straight on the standards. And not only do we study the standards, there's different methodology that's been introduced, like rote memorization that we were taught in our education days. That's dead. Rote memorization. If you teach your child that way, I advise against it. So what's coming to play now is there's two. What you want to say?
Yeah, I'd actually like to chime in on that because that's the side of the program on the overall conceptual front, but also in terms of the actual material and how it applies to the children or whoever uses it. Is that we use those new methodologies and these new standards to create play-based learning games and systems. So the math won't look like any math that you've already seen. As Nkosi was saying, we strongly advise that you do not use rote memorization and flashcards. I used flashcards when I was a child, but I didn't understand it, and it was a nuisance for me. It wasn't inviting. But these new games that we've brought have used actual toys that I played with in like kindergarten and first grade, and we're teaching very advanced topics with them, like the pattern blocks and the snap cubes. We're using those. I actually used them earlier this spring to teach some, what were they? They were like 3rd through 7th graders. They were mostly late elementary, early middle school students, high school algebra using these snap block toys.
Excellent.
And they didn't even realize that they were learning algebra until after I told them at the end of the lesson. So, or at the end of the semester. So again, we just use these play-based systems to make it much easier for learners and for really anyone to learn math and to get over any potential math anxiety.
And like he was saying that it's like anything that you've ever seen, but it's just like what they use in school. So what do I mean by that? All right, so the education system, because of standardization, has changed. There's new methodology and terminology that's being used. So there's something called CPA, or it's called CRA. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but it stands for concrete, pictorial, and abstract, or concrete, representational, and abstract. Mm-hmm. And then there's also a methodology called CGI, which is cognitively guided instruction. Okay, so when we looked at this, the CPA and the cognitively guided instruction, we had to engineer our program to fit this new methodology. And I think we crushed it. We excel at it, like on a whole nother level, where it's embedded in everything that we do. So when you come to us and learn our program, we are American Math because we've taken all of they call them manipulatives. I don't know if you ever heard of manipulatives.
Yes, I'm an educator of 20 years. Yeah.
So we don't call them manipulatives though. So here's what I'm saying. So we've seen this change in math education. So we know that they have these new handheld objects they use to teach numeracy. So he's like, man, we ain't gonna call that manipulatives. We call those math toys. Okay. And the reason we call them math toys is because the young people respond better to the interaction and engagement because it's child-centered. So that's what another thing where it's like, we don't want to we can help the education system, but we're not going to let the education system lead our program if it's not producing the same type of outcomes we're producing. So
I see.
So please don't call them manipulatives. Trust me, if you're a 20-year educator and you go in there and you say, okay, learners, we're going to have fun today. We're going to take out some counting toys and we're going to count today. You'll see a totally different response in their interaction when it comes to the subject. Because
there's also this phenomenon around the United States now, and it was partially driven by COVID, right? And people were at home learning anyway. We have a lot of virtual schools and schooling going on right now. So do you have anything to offer to that element of the population that has taken over the reins for their own children's education?
Under one condition, because it depends on how much you value your child. So for us, we've done a lot of research and development. We've been at this I've been well over 20 years, and I've been definitely committed to it, definitely in the past 10. And what I've learned is if you don't love your child enough to invest in your child's education and curate and be invested in it, don't call me. don't reach out to me. If you want to put your child in front of a computer screen and say, go learn, because I've literally had parents do that. Here, take them, teach them. I'm not, if your child doesn't matter enough to you and you don't love your child enough to be vested in their education, then you're not teaching me that I should love your child that much either.
Okay, so
But if
I
you
want
really-
to, let me stop for 1 second to just make sure that it's clear. So if I come to you as a parent and I want my child to work in your math program, you don't work with the parent. I mean, well, just to be clear, I'm trying to clarify. You don't work with the kids, or you're showing the parents how to work with the kid. Is that what you're saying? Or what are you saying?
I will work with a parent that loves their child. And if that parent was willing to work with me, or an educator that loves their child, and if that parent and educator is willing to work with me, then that parent and education will introduce me to their child. But to set your child in front of me like I'm Mr. American Math and we're going to have math time like story time, I don't have time for that. I definitely don't have time because I'm too busy doing the research and development for the program. I have a love for my community and I definitely want to help my community, but I only deal with parents who love their children. This program grew out of the fact that I looked at what existed and it wasn't good enough for my child. So
Yes.
My whole thing is, if I don't do mediocrity, I don't do failure, I don't do accepting, and I get passionate.
But what I want to say is, it sounds like you have different expectations that maybe a math tutor would have. So I think it's important to talk about, if I were to come to you as a parent, someone who's listening to this podcast and they're interested, what are your expectations of me? If there's my child, there's me. Do I meet you somewhere? And you're going to do a session with me. Me and my child will sit there and do the session together. So what's your expectations? Because I think that's really important to set expectations, because some tutors, you just go, you leave the kid there and they do it. So it just sounds like you have a set of different expectations. And it's because your program is different, you're having really good outcomes, that you need to really set the tone for what your method is and how you want it to roll forward. And I wouldn't know that because my kid's been in the public school system. I've been in the public school system. I've had my kid going to tutoring. So I think really tell us what your expectation is, because it's clear. Because it doesn't necessarily mean that someone doesn't love their child enough, but they don't know, you're not familiar with your program. Like, you founded this program and you found it work. So really be clear about what you expect, your expectations are. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. So I'm not saying that parents don't love their child enough. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, you have to love your child enough to reach out to me. Because trust me, I've done this for a long time. And I typically don't even deal with parents. I don't even deal with parents anymore. That's what I'm trying to tell you. My concentration is solely professional development. If I do the favor of giving my services to a parent, the only way I'm going to do it is if they pass the litmus test of loving their child. I've taught parents who love their children, okay? And when I taught the parent who loved their children, they were very vested. And I gave my time to that parent so that they could teach their children. So I'm telling you, the prerequisite is not that you went to college. The prerequisite is not that you have a lot of money to pay me. The prerequisite is that you love your child. And the reason I would say that is, someone said, "Oh, I'll pay you $1,000 a week to tutor my child because you're American Math." I would be like, that ain't enough money for my time. Mm-hmm. I will only teach your child if you love your child enough to invest your time into your child. So that's why I'm saying my first prerequisite is that you have to love your child. If you love your child enough to get over your fear of math and to get over any type of phobia or trepidation, if you love your child that much, where your love for your child exceeds your fear, you can reach out to us at help@americanmath.com. All you got to do is hit us up at helpinamericanmath.com.
Okay.
Then you, right when you hit us at helpinamericanmath.com, what you want from us, what you need, what you feel in regards to the subject of mathematics. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because a couple of things. Statistically, like, what state are you in?
I'm in California.
Do you know the math performance for children in California, especially African Americans?
It's very low. I don't know the specifics, but I know it's low.
Right. So if the proficiency rate is 20%, and like I don't care what race you are, but I know the stats in Cali, and the proficiency rate I think for African Americans are 20%, maybe 15 to 20%. That's 80%.
Sounds right. Mm-hmm.
That's an 80% failure rate.
Absolutely.
Unacceptable. Right. So for me, if the only way that becomes systemic is that there has to be a mental health problem and a mental health epidemic in the community. And there is one, it's called math phobia or math anxiety.
Oh, I agree with that. Mm-hmm.
So 90% of Americans, or even more, suffer from math anxiety, right?
Yeah.
They might not even know it. So that fear is greater than the love they have for their child. And if that fear is greater for your love than you have for your child, don't call me. But
it's interesting. Yeah, it is interesting that math, being afraid or having a math phobia is very normalized. You hear people say, oh, I don't do math, or I can't do math. I'm not a math person. They feel very comfortable with that. But if it's the other way around, like, it's like, oh, I don't read. I can't read. I don't do reading. Like no one's really saying that, even though there are, of course, people who are illiterate, but they don't feel as comfortable just saying, but people are very comfortable, educators, all kind of people are very comfortable saying they don't do math, they don't know math. And so it's really become normalized, like it's normal, and you're special if you know math. And so I'm glad you're doing something about trying to change that kind of narrative. Yeah.
100%. So I have zero tolerance for it. If that's how you feel, if you don't do math, I don't do you. If you're not a math person, then you're not my type of person.
So you're looking for them to embrace that challenge and work with their kids and work with you to make sure you're getting what your kids need, helping your kid to get what they need.
You're correct. And if I seem abrasive and if I'm hurting people's feelings in a way, I apologize. But I would rather offend you than continue to accept these offensive outcomes. So
yeah, it's something needs to be done. And that's why we have this program for parents to really understand the educational trends like this epidemic of math failure. And then what are some things that parents can do?
Thank you again for joining us at the Falling for Learning podcast. We are here every week. Saturdays at 5 p.m. is when we drop our new episodes. Please listen in every week for those strategies and tips to keep you and the next generation on track for success. You can also find us on YouTube by going to youtube.com/@fall4learning. Again, that's youtube.com/fall4learning. We really appreciate you, and we are here on a mission to make sure that next generation is on track for success and on track for learning. Thanks again. I'm TD Flenaw. Have a wonderful week.